Welcome to the tutorial on sewing up your hot water bottle cover. This is our hot water bottle cover as we've knitted it so far, and I like to sew my domes on and turn the facing over before continuing to knit. The first thing we're going to do is attach our domes, and as you can see, this is the facing band and it's going to be folded over at the picot edge like so, and we're going to sew the domes on the inside so that the stitching won't be visible from the outside. To do that, I've got 3 large domes. These measure about 15 to 18 millimeters. And we just want to make sure that our dome is facing with the prominent part. So you can see the dome has a prominent part that wants to be facing the hot water bottle cover rather than the person holding it. So that's going to go on the upper facing, and this component is going to go on our lower facing. I'm going to start by sewing one of these in the middle. So I know that this is the middle here. I like to use a polyester or cotton sewing thread. The thread that I've chosen is actually a mustard yellow because I want it to be a nice contrast. I'm using a top stitching sewing thread, which is a little bit thicker than your standard sewing thread. And for this I'm using a standard needle, not a tapestry needle. You could use your wool, but I find the wool is a little bit bulky. And then we're going to just secure a knot on the inside. That knot won't be visible, of course. Now we're going to sew on the 2 remaining domes. You want to place your second and third dome approximately halfway between the seam and the center dome. So I'm going to place mine about there. So there we are, we've got 3 domes. We're now ready to sew our facing down. I've threaded a tapestry needle onto the tail left at the end of my cast off edge. This is blunt and so it won't split the fibres as we sew. We're going to turn our facing to the inside, and we want to sew our cast on edge 8 rows below the picot row. So I'm just going to identify the rows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm just passing my needle through the 8th purl bump below the picot edge, and we'll pass it back through the last stitch on the cast on edge, like so. Then we'll identify the next purl bump, which is here, and go through the next stitch on the cast on edge. And we just keep going along like this. If we turn that to the inside, to the right side, you'll see what that looks like. You get the impression of an indentation, but you won't see any of the stitching. So here we've completed sewing our lower facing. This is the inside with the domes, and this is what the outside looks like. We're now ready to sew our side seams together, again using our blunt tapestry needle. I'm going to thread the needle with the yarn tail at the side. If you don't have a tail or it's not long enough, then just start with a new piece of yarn. What we're going to do is sew the ends of the rows together. Let's have a little look at the anatomy of our stitches so that we can identify what we need. So here we've got the end of our row, and we need to identify the gap between the first stitch and the second stitch. Each stitch is a V, and what you can see here is where our increase at the side seam was, and that's sitting next to the second stitch here. Between these two stitches is what we refer to as a bar. You can see that there. It's important to identify the stitch. Often the first stitch curls right over. So if you're looking at a piece of knitting like this, one could imagine that this was the first stitch, but in fact it's the second stitch, and the first stitch is hidden around the corner. What we're going to do now is just go through the bar right at the base of our increased stitch on the right hand side, and then we'll do the same on the left hand side. Like so. Then we're going to take our needle back to where we came from. You can either go under 2 bars, or as I like to do, I just go under 1 bar. I think it gives a slightly more tighter and invisible seam. Going back to the left side, we put the needle through the point where we came out and bring it out above the neck, from under the next bar, like so. This is also called ladder stitch, and you can imagine that the bars represent steps. Do this 4 or 5 times. So you can see it looks like that. Now we're just going to give the yarn a gentle pull. And our seam is now looking invisible. So let's keep going up the side seam. Again, we'll just give it a gentle pull. You can see how that looks really invisible. So we've completed our mattress seam up to the facing, and now we need to include our facing. What I do is I go through both sides of the facing, and then I come up above the bar as previously. So we're just doing the same thing but including the lower aspect of the facing as part of our mattress stitch. On the right hand side we're identifying the bar. We're just going to pull that gently. Because there are the same number of rows on each side, your facing should come directly to the top of the stranded colour work we finished. So we've sewn the side seam on the left hand side, and you can see how tidy that looks. What we're going to do now is just repeat that for the right hand side, and then we'll be joining our facing band, our upper facing band, to the front and return to knitting in the round.